This is episode 35 of Blockchain Innovation.
The cryptocurrency landscape is kind of a parallel universe being built up next to the regulated market where we work in. And I think these two markets have to come together in the end.
Welcome to Blockchain Innovation, where I interview the brightest minds in blockchain every Tuesday. Hey, are you new to the blockchain space? If you are, I've got a great resource for you. Just go to blockchain.global and you can get my 3 most important blockchain videos for free. Now, I know things can get confusing with blockchain and Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I made a free video series covering all of the fundamentals of blockchain, Bitcoin, and Ethereum, strategically organized into 3 videos. And I will update them on a regular basis. I know the industry changes so fast. So go to blockchain.global and you can get them there. And now, back to the show. Hey guys, Frederick Munawa here, and welcome to Blockchain Innovation, where I interview the brightest minds in blockchain every Tuesday. So before we delve into the episode today, I want to discuss 2 things. So the first thing is I hadn't listened to any blockchain/crypto podcast for quite some time. So this week I decided I should. So I'm listening to this show, and one of the hosts points out that his team has consistently published an episode every week for several years. Now, this show, I think, has 5 hosts and another 3 or 4 people assisting on the back end as well. So it's an actual business. Now, keep in mind, I produce Blockchain Innovation 100% by myself, which is kind of crazy. And also keep in mind, other shows outside of the blockchain space have full professional production teams. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that this has been a labor of love. I love blockchain, I love crypto, and I love learning, and this is my vehicle for doing that. But in order for me to consistently pump out an episode every week, I must bring on sponsors and I must bring on external help. So the plan is over the next few months, sponsors and employees will be onboarded, and I think this year will be a monumental year for blockchain innovation. So stay tuned. Okay, second issue, Quadriga. Now, today's episode is about NASDAQ, but at one point in my discussion with Johan Toll, who heads up blockchain at NASDAQ and is today's guest, we talked about how private key management is one of those areas that hasn't been fully figured out. Now, keep in mind, we had this discussion way back in 2018 before the Quadriga debacle. So I was editing this episode and Johan's words felt particularly ominous. And if you're not familiar with the Quadriga story, Quadriga is, well, I guess now, was a dominant cryptocurrency exchange here in Canada. And they had their fair share of financial issues. And amidst all of that, Gerald Cotten, founder and CEO, decides to take a trip to India to open up an orphanage for children. While he's over there, he suffers from complications caused by Crohn's disease, which is basically inflammation of the bowels, and sadly passes away on December 9th. Some people believe this is staged. I'm agnostic, but the real problem here is that Gerald was the only person who had the private keys to Quadriga's cryptocurrency wallets, which right now have about $190 million stored in them, and most of that is customer funds. So I won't delve into that story, but I just wanted to point out how it ties into this episode, which is about NASDAQ. Okay, so in this episode, as I mentioned, I'll be speaking with Johan Toll. That's Johantoll. I think I mispronounced that throughout the episode, so please forgive me for that. I think I called him Johan instead of Johan, so yeah, forgive me. So Johan Toll is Associate VP at NASDAQ and leads NASDAQ's blockchain efforts. He was awarded the prestigious FinTech Person of the Year award by the Financial Technologies Forum. He's a renowned thought leader and frequent speaker and panelist. And NASDAQ, as most of you know, is a financial services firm that owns and operates the NASDAQ stock exchange, as well as 8 other European stock exchanges. So it's a pretty global company. And NASDAQ's US-based exchange has a market cap of $10 trillion and is the world's second largest stock exchange, the largest being the New York Stock Exchange. And in this episode, it's another 2018 blast from the past. Johan and I discuss Well, we discussed so much, but some of the highlights include how NASDAQ is not just a stock market company, but a full-fledged fintech company. We go over how NASDAQ started to experiment with blockchain back in 2012, and how they've created NASDAQ Link, a blockchain-powered private share issuance platform that they used to become the first company in the world in 2015 to issue actual company shares on a blockchain. We discuss NASDAQ CEO Adena Friedman's statement that NASDAQ is open to becoming a crypto exchange. Now, that would be huge. So we'll see what happens with that. And I also want to give a shout out to Amit. He goes by the Twitter handle at AMITJB376, Amit JB376. And this is in reference to episode 34. Amit said, I agree that you have been missed. I have always loved your podcasts, and they seem to be the best ones out there on blockchain. Well, thank you, Amit. I appreciate the tweet. Love the support. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, my handle is at Frederick Munawa. That's at FREDERICKMUNAWA. All right, that was a lengthy intro. Now let's proceed to my conversation with NASDAQ's Johan Toll. Johan, I'm so excited to have you on the show. We've been meaning to have NASDAQ do an episode with us, and that did not happen last year, but now we've got that opportunity to do that this year. So I've given everyone a bit of background on who you are and on what NASDAQ is. Most people know, but I don't think they fully grasp the types of services that you guys offer and the things that you guys do. So maybe you can give us a bit of background on who you are personally, and also on what NASDAQ has been dabbling in the blockchain space.
Sure, I can do. So yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be here in your great podcast. So so my name is Johan Toll. So I'm work as heading up the blockchain at NASDAQ, and I'm based in Stockholm in Sweden for actually one of the largest office in Stockholm at NASDAQ, and I run a lot of projects at NASDAQ related to blockchain then to see where blockchain can really come into play for our markets. And I think, as you said, NASDAQ is very famous for running and operating a couple of great exchanges. In the US as well as over here in the Nordics in Scandinavia. Mm-hmm. And we also provide a lot of nice services, good services to corporations, etc., and provide market data. And what people might not know is also that we are really a big fintech company, in the sense that we're not only building the software for our own exchanges, clearinghouses, and settlement and surveillance services, but we also provide software to more than 90 marketplaces around the globe. So really a big technology vendor, serving bigger markets like Hong Kong or Singapore or Tokyo, for example, or Sydney, as well as smaller exchanges around the globe. So really a big fintech player. So for us, it has been and is really, really important to be the pioneers of technologies. So we scout a lot of new technologies and see and start to understand and how those new types of technologies could come into play in our world. And we also see that we're not only now providing software to the financial markets, to the exchanges and clearinghouses. We also get a lot of requests from bigger banks, etc., to provide them with software, as well as we now get more and more inbound requests from players outside of the financial markets, asking for, could we maybe help them to provide with financially graded technology to perform matching processes of supply and demand, and as well as then safely settle and store those trades into a good system. So I think we've really grown a lot from, starting off, with the famous NASDAQ stock market, fully electronic, into a big fintech company grasping the whole world here.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I know that, I must have come across this when I was doing research for your company, but you've got a venture arm as well, right? I think it's called NASDAQ Ventures, that actually looks at promising fintech startups and then makes investments in those companies. And this would seem unusual for a stock exchange to do. Like, you won't find, I don't think, companies like the New York Stock Exchange or the Toronto Stock Exchange engaging in that kind of activity, at least not at the level that you guys are doing right now.
No, sure. No, I think that's really part of our fintech mission, and continue to be at the forefront of the pioneers of new technology. So very much, scouting out there for new great companies, experts in different types of technologies, and see where we could collaborate with them. And then we see it's a really good way to invest, be an early investor in those companies, and get to learn that new technology and see how that could apply into our businesses. So really to understand what the future will look like, and to see how markets will be rewritten for the future. So I think that's become an increasingly important part of our business now, to collaborate and work with startup companies, and also in some cases then take a strategic portion of that company to more efficiently collaborate together with them.
So NASDAQ was really at the forefront of the blockchain distributed ledger movement, I think early on, a couple of years ago. And right now we've got a lot of companies, a lot of financial institutions that have these proof of concepts that they're working on. And I know that you guys have worked on several platforms, one of them being the Link platform. Can you maybe give us an overview of NASDAQ's efforts in the blockchain space or using distributed ledger technology?
Sure, I can do. So we started 5-6 years ago, I'd say.
Oh.
Very much onto this blockchain endeavor to start to understand what the technology is about. I think, Bitcoin made it more or less all famous for us, and we started to understand that maybe what's behind Bitcoin. I think for us, we quickly realized maybe not Bitcoin will be the primary thing here, but the underlying technology, the blockchain. The possibility to safely do peer-to-peer transactions, and some promises of would it to some extent disrupt the intermediary. And of course, at NASDAQ, we sometimes have that intermediary role. So we would like to see, how could this blockchain technology change the markets that we see and operate today? And what will it look like in the future? So for us, being in the securities industry, it was a natural step to start to see what would it take to actually issue a real company share onto this distributed ledger. And that's what the NASDAQ Private Market Link experiment and pilot was all about. So to make sure that we understand the technology, in a way we need to learn how to crawl before we can run.
Right.
To see, what's in the technology here? What are the positive effects? What are some concerns we might have with the technology? So we actually were the first in the world to issue a share, a real company-owned share, in a distributed ledger, and we did that already in 2015. So I think that was really a milestone for us to see that we could now trust the technology already in 2015 with keeping track of the cap table for a company to understand who owns which shares and be able to transfer the ownership of those shares. Then as a second step, we worked with Citibank.
Okay.
To see also what would it take to actually issue US dollars onto a distributed ledger. Because if we were to have both the securities as well as forms of means of payment, the US dollars more or less, onto the blockchain, we could achieve another really good effect here through the blockchain, because we can then guarantee the deliver versus payment process. So if you think about it today, the blockchain technology, I, as a seller of a security, can, together with you as maybe a buyer of that security, issue a transaction which says that I will deliver you my 10 shares in return for your $100.
Right.
And if we do that in one and the same blockchain, we could be guaranteed on both sides that you will only receive my shares if I receive your money, and vice versa. So that becomes an atomic instruction or transaction guaranteed by the blockchain technology. So not only, the technology is good in keeping track of who owns what, it's also really good in transferring the ownership of those assets, but also to actually solve one of the critical problems we have in the financial industry today, or across many markets, I would say, also outside the financial industry, of achieving this delivery versus payment. How can I secure that you will pay me in return for a delivery of an asset, which is a big problem out there in the industry today. So, together with Citibank and together with our partner Chain.com, who helped us on the blockchain ledgers technology side, we could nicely see how that nicely folds into the blockchain solution. And from those pilots and experiments, I think we've learned a lot, and we moved on. We also did a pilot in Estonia, up here in Scandinavia, to see, if we were to use the technology to actually handle a voting system. And for us, we are into the financial business. We are looking to, if we could facilitate a more transparent, smooth STP way of managing the company, the annual general meetings that the company hosts every year, and perform voting through this technology, that would be kind of a great milestone as well. So instead of now this managing securities or managing money, we could issue voting tickets for the shareholders, and through this technology be able to cast a vote for or against a voting item at the annual general meeting for corporate events.
Right. So this is like proxy voting.
Exactly. So I think the first step is more or less to be able to issue votes on behalf of the shareholders. And then, as you say, the proxy voting is in itself also in the need, I'd say, for improvements and transparency, and be able to follow the chain of proxies in this arena. So we could also then here facilitate how you, as an owner of your votes, could instead direct your proxy to cast the vote on your behalf. And then you could follow the progress in a much more transparent and efficient way using the blockchain technology. So that pilot we've now actually turned into a solution that we now offer from a technology point of view. And the first customer we have on board is the South African CSD, Straight, who signed up for a delivery of this solution to be used then for real production.
So how are the other? Sorry, did you have anything more to add?
Yeah, I think we have many projects running at Nasdaq. So other projects, I think maybe another part. We're really proud because we're already in production with the blockchain technology. So another I did touch upon in the introduction is that we also sell solutions to other types of markets. So, for example, the reinsurance business, to the advertising business, or shipping, etc. So many different types of markets where we can see our technology coming to play. So, for example, with the advertising business, we sold a solution to a startup company called Nayax to trade advertisement contracts with the help of our matching engine technology, and then be able to safely settle those trades in the blockchain solution. And then finally, we have a couple of projects, innovation projects that we are running with here. And I think one very, very interesting example is what we do up here in the Nordics, to see how we could change the trading of mutual fund shares by the help of blockchain. So here in Sweden, for example, it's a prime example where I think blockchain can be used, where you have a lot of different actors in the market, not really cooperating well, not really working on the same systems, no standards, a lot of fragmentation, different siloed systems, and needs to communicate with one another to transfer and relay information of orders, trades, and who owns which shares. And this is especially in the mutual funds market. It's a big market up here. A lot of people use that for pension savings, and you have a monthly subscription. And sometimes there can be, 5, 6, or even up to 10 different intermediaries participating in the chain to be able to communicate a individual's order of buying a fund until it actually reaches the fund company or the fund itself. So many funds are not exchange traded. And then clearly, that's where we see a big potential here could we potentially then use the blockchain technology to create a shared and trusted infrastructure with the help of the blockchain technology?
And I can imagine if you've got, like 10 intermediaries in a transaction, in a simple, or what seems to be a simple transaction like that, then the cost goes up as well, management fees and other fees in between, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Since this creates a lot of cost associated to reconciliation, a lot of cost and taking up by each intermediary involved, and also, a lot of unsecureness, whether the order has arrived. You're all going to have your different cutoff date, and will the order be able to arrive in time before the fund has its cutoff for the day, for example? So I think it's both in terms we can provide a much more efficient solution, much more transparency, and secure solution by the help of technology. So could we more or less put all the different actors and to agree on one mutually shared environment? That would be a great success and a great showcase for the blockchain technology itself.
So we know that mutual funds, for example, just using that last example that you gave, have notoriously high fees. And so I'm just wondering if, for example, let's say that the market adopts this new technology that you guys are coming up with on a large scale across the board. Do you think that has the potential of maybe lowering the actual management fees for mutual funds, or does that cost simply go to the mutual fund company? Does the cost savings go to the mutual fund company alone, or does it go all the way back to the actual investor?
I think we're clearly going to see a lot of benefits from all the different actors' perspective. Both a fund company, they can execute orders much faster. Me as an individual investor into a fund can receive acknowledgement faster, and I can turn around on my money much quicker. And clearly, if we can reduce the burden of a reconciliation, we can lower the transaction path. I think that would, in the end, also, probably be a way for the various actors in the industry to overlook their fees that they charge. It's a competitive arena as well. So I think all the actors here would like to see how they can then use the solution the best.
Right. Now, another thing that I was going to ask you was, so you've talked about all these different projects, Link and NASDAQ Ventures and the proxy voting project that you guys are working on. How has the adoption been for those projects? So you started out in 2015, or even 6 years ago, you started out experimenting, but do you have a lot of clients right now? Is it at the proof of concept stage, or are you readily onboarding new clients for these projects?
I would say we have clients on all different levels. As I've said initially, a couple of clients are already in production, so to say, and actually are starting to use the blockchain technology for sending real transactions or confirming real transactions in the blockchain solution. Right. Then we have a couple of projects, in the pipeline, in the pilot stage, or early testing, and then we do run a couple of proof of concepts. So I think they're all in different maturity grades. And as always, I think every project you need to run through the business case and understand where does it really make sense to use blockchain versus not. Where do you have enough interest from the market to gain momentum and gain interest to actually invest in building something new that you want to do. So I think I would say we are in production, but we continuously looking for also new types of business coming up, and then we evaluate every business opportunity to see where blockchain comes into play, or where maybe other technologies can do the job better, or in combination with the technology of DLTs.
And which out of all the projects that you touched on, which ones are the ones that are in production and are readily onboarding new clients? Which ones have taken off?
So I think the prime one there is probably on the non-financial side, where we see the biggest uptake of the blockchain technology. I mean, because that's also where we see you don't have a trusted central operator in the solution. Maybe the market is fragmented. It's a lot of manual intervention. There is no formal marketplace. So that's where we see the biggest adoption of this technology initially. I think it's also probably where we're going to continue to see a lot of uptake of the technology, where you don't have, existing marketplaces. It's a bit of a tougher game, of course, to replace something that's already up and running and in place, and people don't really have a problem maybe with the market as it looks today. So I think it's important when you scout for new opportunities, look, where do I currently have a business problem to solve? And then how can I best solve that business problem? And I think for blockchain, it's really interesting areas where you have, as we call them, the O2C markets or the bilateral markets, where you have a lot of bilateral relationships with multiple parties. And maybe before you can make a trade today, you need to create the trust, and you need to understand who's behind before you can trust that party to do a transaction with it. And through blockchain, we can much more clearly create a world of trust with the help of this technology.
So then are you alluding to the advertising solution that you described?
Yeah,
Is
sure.
That
that's really one of the examples where, they are using the technology here. And I think that's also where they show how you can now take a manual, non-existing market, I'd say, where everything is done by telephone, or you don't have a central place for putting up the supply and demand for all those contracts. And now they are looking to create that marketplace for these type of contracts. And I think that will very much speed up that market, lower the spread, and lower the prices of those contracts, and speed up the market significantly. So I think we at Nasdaq see now marketplaces, able to pop up everywhere. You can see marketplaces all around the globe in all different types of industries. You're gonna meet the supply and demand, and that's where we excel with our technology, and to both provide really good matching engines then for in different types of modes. If you want to do an auction, or if you have a spot trading going on, or continuous trading, for example, as well as then safely then secure the trade of the deals you have agreed upon on the marketplace.
Now, because you guys operate in this highly regulated environment, at least when it comes to securities and the financial services side, I was actually talking to someone who is employed by a shareholder services company. And we were just talking about how difficult it is to navigate some of these environments. And in this particular case, we're talking about proxy voting, right? Mm-hmm. So what these guys do is whenever a client has a proxy voting concern or issue, they go to this firm. It's a shareholder services firm. And then that firm helps them navigate that environment and solve that problem. And one of the issues it brought up was privacy issues in North America. So when you're doing proxy voting, I'm sure you've heard of the non-objecting beneficial owner or objecting beneficial owner election when it comes to proxy voting. So NOBO, OBO, and how that's a privacy issue in North America. I'm not sure how it is in Sweden, but basically to the listeners, this is when you are the beneficial owner of a stock, but then the stock is actually registered in the name of your broker. Right. And then the broker then gives you the option to choose whether or not you want to reveal your private information or to keep that private information private, which is where you get the non-objecting beneficial owner and objecting beneficial owner status. If you elect to have that private information released to other parties, it means you are non-objecting, which is the NOBO status. But then if you say, hey, I want my private information to remain private, that means you're objecting to having it shared. You're the OBO status. I know those names sound funny, but that's what they're called. And then navigating those privacy issues causes a lot of headaches. So that's just one aspect, right? And it's kind of like almost like a legal aspect because it deals with privacy. So when you're creating a platform that is maybe tokenizing votes in some way. How do you navigate some of these legal issues and privacy issues where you've got traditional players that are well versed in those areas?
Yeah, I think that's really where we can excel at Nasdaq as well, because we have a lot of experiences of managing that type of data in our solutions, and that's I think it's this Novo Obo that you got is similar to what we have over here as well. And now we actually in Europe we have something maybe even bigger with, which is called the GDPR,
right?
Where
yeah.
you need to protect the privacy of personal data. So I think that really comes into play well now with blockchain, because you really need to make sure that what you post on the shared distributed ledger is okay from a regulatory point of view as well. So that's exactly what we're looking into, for example, in the funds case here, in the mutual funds case, to see, what data are we actually allowed to put on the shared ledger? How much of personal information could there be, or couldn't there be any? Maybe we can only relay an identification. And so the privacy of the data, which also relates to the proxy side here, is very, very important. So we have a couple of solutions for that, and how to handle that, and how you maybe just relay the identification or a hash value of someone's data, and you can encrypt that person's data outside of the system. And also with GDPR, it's important you have to, honor the rights to be forgotten. So,
right.
If you think of it, the blockchain should be immutable, and everything that is written once should never be removed. So then, by default, you're probably going to have a problem to store personal data on a shared, distributed, immutable ledger. So that's exactly the areas we are now, looking to make sure that we then continue to be compliant with existing and incoming regulations that we see. So I think there are multiple solutions that come into play there. And we actually did an investment recently from the venture cap arm in a company called Cubic, which kind of exactly are targeting this area now of privacy. And also, there's been a lot of discussions about ownership of data. Could we actually give some money back to the individuals that actually share personal data?
Oh, that's very smart.
And how can we then, in the end, make sure that the data is protected? And if you decide not to participate or share your data anymore, how can we then make sure to safely remove and prove that we actually remove the data for that person? So that's exactly the area we are in now, and that's related to the Cubic investment we did, as well as we have a new offering out called the Audit Hub, that also focuses on compliance efforts and make sure that you have the proof of process, that you can prove that you have done a certain task. And right. Then you send the proof onto the immutable ledger. So it's clear for everybody that, yes, I now remove the keys to this encrypted data, for example.
That's very interesting. So you guys are leveraging public key cryptography then to enable all of this.
Yeah. So, we also now invested a lot in something we call the Nasdaq Financial Framework, which is, a much more modern service bus. And on top of that, we have multiple applications that we can then use to then construct different types of solutions for our customers, as well as for our own markets. So within that, for example, we have this integrity application, to make sure then that we manage and handle the privacy of the data in the correct ways.
So are you working with traditional companies? So you've got companies like Glass Lewis and ISS. Those are like the proxy voting companies. And you've got corporate actions companies like TCS, banks, and transfer agency companies like Computershare. Are you working with those companies, or are you actually competing with them?
I think it's both, I would say.
No.
Actually, to some extent, we are competing because, we're both an exchange and a marketplace, but we're also a provider of technology. So in that sense, where companies provide technologies, we do sometimes compete. But as I always claim, in a way, I think what's really great with blockchain is that it opens up for collaboration. And it even opens up collaboration between peers and partners and customers and clients. which is a very interesting area for blockchain, because I don't think you should do blockchain develop on your own. You should collaborate and work together with your industry participants. And then sometimes you're going to have competitors sitting maybe on the same table, but you realize that like in the mutual funds case, there are common grounds you could share, and then you can compete on the business layer rather than maybe on the core blockchain foundational layers.
Right, which is exactly what I was telling this gentleman from this shareholder services company, that because I guess maybe their competitive advantage is to keep everything kind of shrouded almost. Whereas, the new business models are all about, openness and sharing and collaboration, like you just touched on there. And so you can compete, like you said, on the business side in terms of, your offering, how you position yourself and things of that nature. But at the same time, to prevent the whole industry from disappearing, you need to collaborate on certain key technological foundations, which I definitely agree with you on that. Yeah,
I think in many cases you can see a win-win there for all the participants in the industry that could be mutually agree on the cornerstones for how to manage a transaction. It's not necessarily there we compete, and then instead it should be free for anybody then to build applications on top of that and offers as good as possible services to the end clients and the end customers. And we clearly see how building up new businesses based on this technology and other technologies. We have cloud computing coming in, we have machine intelligence, you're soon going to have quantum computing, etc. We scout all those new technologies to understand then what are the new types of businesses coming up. So we clearly see how we can both improve our existing businesses with the help of the technology, but we also see how this helps us, or we can see new revenue opportunities coming in thanks to this technology.
So besides, maybe financial services companies, I know you talked about the advertising company as well. NASDAQ is a big name. You're a big company. What types of companies do you work with right now in terms of implementing some of your solutions? And then in the future, what types of companies do you foresee yourselves working with in terms of both in terms of industry and in terms of size as well?
Yeah, so at different levels on it. From the startup part, I can talk to the public ones. We were an early investor in a company called Chain.com. We believe provide a really, really good financially graded blockchain ledger technology for the financial business. So we were an early investor together with Visa, Pfizer, and a couple of more companies. So together with them, we have really evolved the technology a lot, and also built the technology, geared it specifically for the financial business, where you need high throughput, you need privacy and confidentiality, and you need different types of consensus models that's used in financial business. So that's maybe one good example for where we collaborate with a strategic partner. I think Hubix is the latest release. I can also talk about how we now collaborate with them. They provide an excellent location service for mobile phone applications. And then, the ability then to provide your data into those location services, and how they work on using machine intelligence to aggregate the data and be able to derive new businesses out of that, for example. So that's kind of good showcases of where we collaborate with startup companies. And then we also collaborate with existing incumbents, you could say, or bigger companies. Like in the mutual funds case, we more or less gathered the biggest banks in the Nordics together with a couple of distributors and service providers, and sit now around the table together then to define the initial scope for the solution. So that's an evidence of how we collaborate with incumbents, or I gave you the Citi example before.
Right.
So also another example of that. And then combined with that, I think, blockchain is not the silver bullet to everything. Blockchain will do solve one part of your business or business problem, but you need to, be good at many more technologies to provide a complete solution, to have a holistic solution that serves the whole eco environment for your industry. So I think for us, we are scouting many new technologies. I mean, lately now you're going to look into virtual reality solutions, for example. Quantum computing, fog computing, etc. And we also look on this from a business perspective, thinking about, if everybody in the end will be up there in the cloud instead of running on-prem services, how will that change the commercial landscape for the various actors currently playing in the field? So, we both put a technology point of view onto this as well as a commercial point of view. And we also work intensely with the regulators and so to make sure to see, how could we continue to provide safe and robust and good markets in the regulated world, and how could we, what regulations might needs to be updated or changed to cater for the future.
That's very interesting because, regulation, I think, is a big challenge for most companies, and not even just financial services companies, but any kind of company that deals with either blockchain or cryptocurrency. So what do you find? So I'm sure there are a lot of people from the financial services industry listening, and we know that a lot of financial services companies, they've launched these proof of concepts. And, I believe somebody must have been a CoinDesk article, but they were talking about 2018 being the year where a lot of these proof of concepts go live. But you guys already have projects that have gone live. We just talked about that. But what do you see as the biggest challenge for a large financial institution or just a large company that's trying to implement blockchain or some type of distributed ledger solution? Do you see that as being regulation or some other hurdle?
I would say maybe a challenge that I'm currently working on or looking at is, how could you set up I call them kind of commercial networks or business networks with the help of blockchain here. Blockchain to me is the technology. I think we feel very comfortable with the technology now. We know it's good enough, it's capable enough of doing what we want it to do, and it's secure, and we have good control of the keys, etc. So from a technology point of view, we are okay. The technology will for sure continue to evolve, and it needs to be able to scale up even further, but it's a good start. So I think from us, the focus is much more to really find the best use cases for where this really can come into play. I think, we all see a lot of proof of concepts being run or press releases being made, right. And then you don't really hear back from them. And you realize that maybe blockchain wasn't the best technology to solve the business problem. Or maybe they actually didn't have a real business problem worth paying for. It was more like we want to do something with blockchain, and then we sent the press release. So I think for us, it's much more, average, day-to-day business now. Looking where could we improve the market? Where could we solve real business problems? And of those use cases, where does blockchain really come into play in a good way? And once you've found them, I think the challenge is to set up really good business consortium models. How do you collaborate together with peers and partners? How do you set this up? If you don't want to go the fully public blockchain way, how do you set up the governance of this network, the rules, the business rules? I kind of always claim that, if something goes wrong in the Bitcoin world, if you lose your Bitcoins, there is no one to call. There is no way to get them back. Yep. And I don't think that will work fully in the financial arena. So that's also a very important question to answer, not only for yourself, but maybe for your financial securities auditor, the FSAs. When something goes wrong, how do you resolve that? If something apparently is wrong with the code, how do you fix that bug in the code? I think those are really important areas to have answers on. So how do you set up the business rules, the consortium rules? How do you split and share revenues and costs to set up these type of networks? And then in the end, as you touched upon on the regulatory aspect, how do you continue then to make sure that you have a regulatory blessing from the current regulations we've got? Luckily, most of the regulation doesn't stipulate what technology to use. So I think we can see that you can launch a lot of use cases under the existing laws and regulations. But you, of course, need to be very safe about what about confidentiality, what about settlement finality, legal point of transfer of ownership, conflict of laws, data protection, cybersecurity, etc. And not to forget about the anti-money laundering or terrorist financing. How do we make sure that we can be sure that money is not used for financing terrorists or used for money laundering? Those are very important aspects for us.
I think you really hit the nail on the head there with focusing on the business model, because that's not only a problem for the larger enterprises, but it's also a problem for startups as well. Because as you know, or as you might know, in the ICO world, you've got a lot of companies that are trying to introduce tokens without a business model, right? Because they just want to raise money. So similarly, I guess, in the enterprise world, you've got a lot of companies that want to get on the blockchain hype train, but they're not building the right business models that complement that solution. They haven't figured out the problem solution relationship between blockchain and whatever challenge they might be trying